Today on the season premiere of the Wrestling Roundtable, the 2010 year in review, and the 5th anniversary of Eddie Guerrero's death. Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. I can't believe it's been 3 years already, 3 whole years. We're in our 4th season now. And thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you join us on WrestlingRoundtable.com. We finished up the season a few months ago in the last year in 2010, which we will be reviewing next. But there's always something on WrestlingRoundtable.com. I can't even tell you how many hours I've put into this website in the past month especially. We've had our biggest site update ever in January, and we're not stopping. There's always news, recaps, columns, guest columns. We've had a lot of input from our fans, and I appreciate that. We just want more traffic. Go to the shop. Sign up for the newsletter and message board, all at WrestlingRoundtable.com. Always going to be something there for you, but now we are going into Season 4 with our 2010 year in review. Before we get down to business, of course, the intros. Sitting to my left, which is your right, is...
Will effing Brooks.
Will Brooks, thank you for joining us on the panel yet again.
My
Been a
pleasure.
fan of 23 years. And sitting to my right, which is your left, the LeConte brothers. First, introducing Martin. Excuse me, Martin. Also to my right, which is your left, the director of the Grappling Kings. He's a commercial specialist and a fan of 22 years already. Can you believe that? We've been watching 22 years pro wrestling. Rodney LeConte, how's the Grappling Kings coming?
Coming along very well, coming along pretty good. Definitely going to be released this year. I can
Excellent.
guarantee that.
Well, that's your documentary, Rodney. My documentary, The Wrestling Road Diary, should be coming out in February, but stay tuned for more information on that on WrestlingRoundtable.com. Director and editor of that documentary, like I said, that is me. Been working in wrestling a little over 6 years. I'm Eric Santamaria, and I've been a fan of 22 years, just as long as you have, Rodney. But that's pro wrestling. We're going to start with mixed martial arts first. And what a year for mixed martial arts. It's a big loss. We've seen losses of heavyweights, losses of entire companies and divisions, it seems. So a lot of big changes and shakeups in mixed martial arts. Good year for MMA, but not so much for a lot of the established players like BJ Penn, and we'll get to Brock Lesnar. But I wanted to start off with probably the biggest one, which is Fedor Emelianenko's big loss. Really his first loss ever, not on his record, but the first person to really beat Fedor Emelianenko, Fabricio Werdum, and then they seemingly both drop off the face of the planet. We're going to be going to Strikeforce coming up in a few weeks and seeing his comeback fight, but what do you think the impact was of Fedor's loss, Martin? Did Strikeforce not capitalize on it?
I guess not, because think about it. Fabricio Werdum, he's a good fighter and everything, but think about it. This is somebody the UFC let go, and then he goes on to beat Fedor.
Well, that's not so much the thing. It's, yeah, he rebounded from that cut from UFC. Great. But you'd think that the person who finally beat Fedor would have become a superstar overnight, and that didn't really happen. And I know most people watching this will probably say his surgery and him not
Surgery
fighting.
could be after
But is
the
that
big
really
ones.
an excuse for not making the guy in a star, though?
No, it's not an excuse, but I'm just saying, it's not like it was meant to happen that way.
It certainly wasn't booked to happen.
He was going to fight this, or maybe they were going to do 2. They wanted to do sequels. They had so many plans after, but they just never, I don't think it's Strikeforce's fault for not following through with their plans.
I think Strikeforce should have jumped on it. Yeah, he got surgery, but he could still done something. Should have got his name out there and done something. Should have made sure he got the next title shot. Instead of, granted, they're doing the Grand Prix now, which is kind of cool, but they should have gave him the next shot when he got healthy.
I like Strikeforce. I'm a fan of Strikeforce, fan of Scott Coker, but you see the difference between USC and Strikeforce. Just because you have a roster of named fighters doesn't mean that you could call yourself one of the greatest promotions. UFC would have done wonders. It would have been a big difference between what UFC would have done with Fabricio and what Strikeforce would have done with Fabricio. Strikeforce has a bad habit of putting all the eggs in one basket. It happened with Gina Carano, happened with Dan Henderson. They put all this promotion between one fighter, and they don't prepare themselves for a loss. At least UFC prepares you for this guy goes this way. They have different directions. They have plans. At least it's a legit loss. It wasn't any BS stoppage or anything.
Or a judge's decision.
It was a decision, and you really see Fabricio setting up for that triangle, and Fedor was just trying to pound away. He didn't seem very urgent to escape from it. It was too late, and then just the one tap is all he needed.
You wouldn't expect someone with CBS connections to not be able to make Verdum a huge star, even if he was inactive. But speaking of huge stars, literally and figuratively, the biggest star in mixed martial arts, Brock Lesnar, came back, and after that bout with the tuberculosis, or however you pronounce his intestinal disease, a lot of people were wondering, is Carwin going to be the guy to stop him? And it sure as hell looked like it in the first round. He came back with his first submission, not by strikes, by an actual hold. Really great to see Brock Lesnar do that. And we thought, yes, this is a new Brock. He had a new attitude, it seemed. He seemed a lot more calm and level-headed after that bout with illness. But then he comes back and gets steamrolled by Cain Velasquez, and all of a sudden his spirit is broken, according to the rumors. He's not leaving UFC to do WrestleMania like everyone thought. But it did seem for a while there that Mr. Pick Up My Ball and Leave if things don't go my way after a couple years might have done that to MMA. Hopefully he sticks with it. But what do you think how that affected UFC? This is their biggest draw. Did it really hurt them to have someone as their main guy on their cover of magazines like Lesnar get exposed so badly?
No, absolutely not, because they have other guys like that. They had him, and then they had an up-and-comer. Look at the way they promoted the commercials. The first Mexican heavyweight, there hasn't been a Mexican heavyweight champion.
Ever, in any form of fighting.
Exactly. They promoted Cain Velasquez like that, so it was a win-win situation for them, and I don't think that hurt anybody at all.
Did you ever notice whenever someone gets their ass kicked, they lose their smile? Shawn Michaels gets his ass kicked by Syracuse, New York, and loses his smile. Vader gets beat up by Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, loses his smile, and goes to WF. And now Brock Lesnar flirted with leaving UFC after getting his ass kicked.
Rumors.
I mean, granted, it was rumors, but it was flirted with the idea. But honestly, I didn't think it was a bad thing either. Like you said, it was the up-and-comer and the older guy. And it was great, because Cain Velasquez is a very talented wrestler. It's not a fighter. It's not like if he would have lost to, say, Randy Couture a couple years ago instead of winning the title, that probably would look bad, because they wanted Brock Lesnar to be the next guy. And if he would have lost to Randy Couture, he would have been stuck with this. I love Randy Couture, but he was stuck with a 48-year-old heavyweight champion now.
Well, they definitely want to hold on to Brock, because there's a lot more big fights left for him, right?
Yeah.
Exactly, and people still forget that Brock Lesnar is very, very young
5-2.
in the sport. He's 5-2, so a loss to Cain Velasquez, I don't think set Brock back at all because of his wins, because of what he did in the short amount of time he's been in UFC. The impressive win over Shane Carwin, which two huge bulls who really walk around over the 275-pound limit. Two great wrestlers, so that had the back and forth banter. Shane Carwin was the Division II champion, and Brock Lesnar was the Division I champion. Legit, I wouldn't say hatred, but dislike for each other. That was a very impressive win by Brock, especially when he was down. But with Cain, you just showed how quickly Cain has improved as a striker and as a wrestler, being able to take Brock Lesnar down. So it was an exciting fight, but I still think that Brock has a lot left in him.
Speaking of exciting fights, WEC provided tons over the course of their history, but their history is no more. Right in December, WEC 53 was their last event. UFC is now merging the lighter divisions, featherweight, bantamweight, into the main Zuffa branch of UFC. And at first it was bittersweet for me because I really enjoyed WEC. I liked it being separate, its own entity, but seeing a lot of these guys like Faber and Henderson and Aldo scheduled for upcoming UFC events really is exciting. So do you think it's something they should have not done, stuck with, or was it the right move?
That's something they should have done. You're going to see 135 and 145 and everything. That's going to do everything with UFC. They're probably going to be ultimate fighters in those weight classes and everything. But the only division that really gets affected is the 155 division. Now you got like all the really talented ones, and then they really have to fight. Like now they really have to fight more and win their fights to stay in the UFC. So I think it's just bittersweet. But the only thing is, 155 I think is the only weight class that really gets affected by it.
I agree. Right now, the WC was great as its own entity, as its own brand, but it wasn't getting the viewership that Fertitas and Dana White really hoped for. You have great fighters, great fights, a lot of charismatic guys, But it's time for them to be in that UFC spotlight, to get in that mainstream spotlight. Now that they're under the UFC banner, the UFC audience gets to see these great fights like Dominic Cruz and Joseph Benavidez and Miguel Torres. And now I think we're going to see the lighter guys really bring in a lot of money for UFC.
Plus, I think it's also part of their international expansion strategy to bring in some of the lighter fighters.
Anybody who has any doubts about whether it's a good move or not, wait until you see the first Jose Aldo fight. Then you can talk to me about whether it was a good idea or a bad idea.
Wait till you see
great...
Dominic Cruz.
Yes, him too. And I can't wait to see Uriah Faber live at Prudential Center. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, we're running out of time, gentlemen. We're trying to wrap up the year. Let's see if FEG can even make it into the next year. They're taking off the first few months. And they say if they don't get international funding, they're gone. So maybe K1 and Dream won't be around by this time next year. We'll see. But sticking in 2010, let's run down what you think is fight of the year, Martin.
WEC 53, Anthony Pettis and Ben Henderson. An awesome fight. I honestly think that Anthony Pettis could beat Frankie Edgar.
I do too, but is everyone going to say the Pettis-Henderson fight? Because I certainly was too.
I'm not going to say it. I mean, the
it's
kick
up
alone
there,
makes
but
you want to say it, but...
The kick alone, but the thing is,
Well,
it's just like the
not
fight
the-
itself.
Not the
The fight was
kick
a good
alone.
fight. It was a good
No. Not the kick alone. The kick was great and an all-time highlight, sure. But even before that happened, in like the last minute of that fight, I still thought I felt.
It still
Before
felt like-
that, I had watched
Yeah.
Fight of the Year, so it was a great fight before
Great
that.
fight.
And that was so awesome. That was the WC's last fight. Like,
Yeah, they went out with a bang, and now it
They
just
went
gives you a
out.
taste of what's to come for UFC.
Chael Sonnen, Anderson Silva.
A lot of people are saying that.
Mostly because it was the first time someone really took the fight to Silva, like I said they was going to do, and he really, wow, it was like, oh my God. Like you thought Silva was actually going to lose. Then he pulls the triangle out of his ass in like the last 30 seconds. And still, but the best part is he did with all the broken ribs, which just says how badass Anderson Silva really is.
You should have seen the explosion when we were watching that at Chris's house. Just, you fell on the floor. Like, I was running around the room. See, I love that fight, and it's one of the great moments ever in UFC history, sure. But for me, it would be a little more even, like a chess match, which I thought the Pettis-Henderson fight was. I think Sonnen, yeah, it was a great story, but I like seeing more competitive fights for Fight of the Year, in my opinion. But what's yours?
Anderson Silva, Chael Sonnen, like he said, just the drama behind it, but you say Joseph Benavidez versus Dominic Cruz for the bantamweight title. Very similar to the Frankie Edgar Gray Maynard match, where it was really two skilled guys going at a really hard pace for 25 full minutes with great takedown defenses, really good matchmaking by WEC. This is a rematch between these two. Joseph Benavidez's only loss in WEC was to Dominic Cruz, so it's a chance to not only gain the belt, but to get revenge. But Dominic Cruz just showed how skilled he is, and really, I've said this so many times, please, if you haven't looked up this guy, it is a treat to see this guy fight.
Is he Fighter of the Year, though? And that's what we're going to move on to next. Fighter of the Year, Martin.
Anderson Silva. You fight a guy who's on steroids, but the thing is you're injured at it, and the thing is at first people advise him not to fight before that. He fought before that, he's almost lost, but he won.
He didn't win one round and he's Fighter of the Year. You think that justifies that comeback?
Because that shuts people up. I could be innocent, because look at her fights before Chael Sonnen, like the Damian Maia fight, and then that dumb fight like last year. You saw like a lot of his title shots that were bad, and then you saw this one.
You knew he still had it. Undefeated in UFC middleweight champion for all these years.
Still pound for pound the best fighter. Frankie Edgar.
I knew
boy
you'd say
from
that.
Tom's River.
Hard to
Again,
dispute.
Yeah, very hard to dispute. This kid who really has come up through the ranks in the UFC lightweight division, which is probably the toughest division in all of MMA, to come out, be underdog against BJ Penn in Abu Dhabi, beat him at his own game, then to come back and do it worse, proving that the first fight wasn't a fluke. If the draw happened a day earlier, you could say that too. It's an incredible comeback, but he's still young. He's only 29 years old, always improving. One of the wrestlers that has really adapted to the sport and is really superb and stand up in all aspects of MMA, and he's 2010 Fighter of the Year.
Cain Velasquez for beating Nogueira, which is an all-time legend, and really kicking his ass too.
Yeah.
And then taming the beast, beating Brock Lesnar, even with the Wolfman look he had going on. One of Brock Lesnar's biggest assets was fear. People were scared of Brock Lesnar. They didn't want to admit it, but they were scared of him because he's a humongous
Just
guy.
look at him.
Humongous guy, very athletic, and his hands are like this. I mean, I got small hands. This guy's huge. And for Cain Velasquez not being scared, even that initial bull rush he gave him, was like he wasn't even scared. He moved to the side and started pounding on him. It was great. showed me a lot this year, go Cain Velasquez.
A lot of people would probably say GSP, another pound-for-pound fighter, got 2 wins in 2010, one against Dan Hardy in Newark, and then he came back against the critics who said that all he would do is lay and pray with complete stand-up dominance over Josh Koscheck, jabbed his face off, really, and looked like a great boxer out there. But I'm going to throw one out of left field. What about Ben Askren? 7-0 Bellator welterweight champion. I saw him win the belt live in the Liacouras Center in Philadelphia, and he's won 4 fights this year alone, much like Aldo did the year before. That might be another nominee. But I'm going to throw Ben Askren out there because going into this fight, I was told to check out this guy. He's like a prodigy, former successful wrestler. Watch him go. And it's really impressive, and that's a lot of wins for 1 year. But that's enough for now. We're going to move on to Pro Wrestling's Year in Review when we come back.
Birthday, man Hart. Make sure you watch the Wrestling Roundtable.
Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. If you're not watching us on YouTube, you might be watching us on Go Fight Live. Thanks to Go Fight Live for also simulcasting our radio show, which we'll tell you more about later on. But we're also on iTunes. Go look for us on iTunes or WrestlingRoundtablePodcast.com. So take us on the go if you're making a long trip. So, joining the panel for the first time, another fan of the show. See, this is your show too. Will Brooks was a fan. Now Orlando O'Neal's a fan of 19 years of pro wrestling, and thank you for joining us on the panel.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well, we're going to talk about the year in review for pro wrestling now, 2010, and I think starting right off, January 4th was a huge night in pro wrestling, and 2 of the stories that we're going to talk about branched off from that night. Of course, Hogan and Bischoff coming back to TNA, we'll mention in a little bit, but Bret Hart coming back to WWE for the first time in like 13 years. I know a lot of people were looking forward to it, a lot of people were excited for it, but as the months unfolded, I don't know if they were that into it and seeing where it went, especially with that match at WrestleMania and maybe beyond. But what do you guys think about Bret Hart's comeback? Was it something that you were excited about, happy with, or was he finally selling out to Vince McMahon like everybody else except Bruno?
I could not wait. I counted the days and the hours and the minutes when Bret Hart would be back on Monday Night Raw. And then I watched it, and I couldn't believe they cut his balls off like they did. I mean, I understand you want to make amends with people after so long, but come on, man. You just look not like Bret Hart before. Bret Hart used to stand up and kick people's asses that they were bad, and now
He wouldn't be hugging Shawn Michaels.
or trying to hug Vince McMahon and then take a kick to the balls and do nothing about it. That wasn't Bret Hart, and I miss him.
This is the perfect example of never say never. Like my dad always says, everyone always comes back to work with Vince McMahon no matter what happened between them. But that night, that January 4th night, was the first time in a long time where I was excited about wrestling. Where I was really counting down the minutes, even for TNA.
Mm-hmm.
And I just knew that it was always the same thing with Raw and Nitro, where you had that first few minutes of Raw started, where you knew Nitro was going to do something big to counter-program that.
Ric Flair in a limo and Jeff Hardy.
Right. But nothing could stop me from watching Bret Hart. Did they cut his balls off? What do you get expected? He's general manager. He's not going to come out with Jim Neidhart or whoever and start angles right away. The whole thing with Michaels, Michaels did get better in the segment, but I was still excited to see him. I was still excited to watch him walk down the aisle, even though I hated those jean shorts. I always will forever. I'll always forever hate those shorts. As time went on, it dwindled down a little bit. The interest was losing itself. I think they could have done a lot better things with the McMahon-Bret Hart angle.
Right, let's jump ahead in the year. Like, let's say we get to SummerSlam time when he's doing the big 10-man tag or whatever. How did you think his whole run had come to at that point?
I thought he actually did pretty good because, Bret Hart is limited physically as to
He's
what he can do.
wrestling now.
Yeah, wrestling. So he's limited, so I wasn't expecting him to go out there and give it his all, take big bumps or anything. But it was actually fun to see him in the ring. It was fun to see him with a smile on his face. Because, when you've seen him over the years, everybody says he sounds grumpy, mad at the world, but you could tell when he was in WWE, he was actually having a good time. Seeing him at SummerSlam, doing the little moves that he was doing. It was fun. It just brought back old memories.
Yeah, but the thing is, you can't take a bump. You can't get hit. You can't take a bump. So having a wrestling match,
I would
is
have
kinda
rather
like,
not seen him in the ring.
Exactly.
I
Okay.
would have rather.
All right.
maybe like maybe a little interference, like pull a guy's leg when he's running the ropes, kind of thing.
All right,
Fine,
but like Orlando was saying, a lot of people are of the mindset that this is great for him to be over it, not be bitter. I think it's more like he's marking out for himself and wanted to come back because he loved it. But that's another thing. I just think this is a perfect example of WWE overthinking things way too much. How is it that we get to WrestleMania, you have, let's say, a feud that had 13 years of build behind it, based on real life events like the Monday Night Wars. There was a reason it was so big, because it was real. This was real too. They didn't need to hype this at all. They didn't even need to be in the same ring together in any segment to build this up. This was all built up beforehand, and they just got to turn it into, oh, he's faking an injury, and now he's trying to ban him, and now it's the family. Fuck all that bullshit. Just put it in there. There needed to be no hype, but there was a lot of hype between Hogan and Bischoff coming into TNA. A lot of people were making this out to be like the 2010 version of '94 when Hogan came into WCW, and a lot of people dreading it. And it seems like it came to fruition. Hogan brought in a lot of his friends and destroyed the six-sided ring, and people say the X Division and all this other stuff. So how do you think, now that we're saying it a year later, Hogan and Bischoff turned out to be in TNA? Was it good?
No, not a, for me.
Hogan brought them their highest rated segment ever.
Yeah, but now look at them. You
Right.
know, like when I heard Hogan and Bischoff were gonna come to TNA, it kind of sounded like '99 when Ed Ferreira and Vince Russo were gonna come into WCW, and brought the Nasty Boys. Really, the Nasty Boys and the Dudley Boys on. Who wants to watch that?
I wanted to see that.
Yeah.
But
for novelty, that's it though.
point being, Hogan did bring them their highest rated segment ever. So he accomplished the goal of bringing more eyes onto TNA than had ever seen it before, but they obviously didn't hook them.
Yeah, this was the one thing I said it on the show, on the radio. TNA is getting the biggest name in wrestling. If this does not help them get to the point where they can actually be competitive against WWE, then I don't know what else they need. Because not only were they going head-to-head with Raw for the first time, Monday nights are going live, which is what made Nitro so controversial, what made Nitro so big, what made the Monday Night Wars, but they're getting Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff.
And Flair, and Jeff Hardy, and the NWO guys, and whoever else. So at least they had the balls to at least step up to the plate and try and do that. But once you get the attention, you need to give them something that makes them want to come back.
You
And I
need to
guess
keep it.
a year later, they still haven't done that.
They could have beaten WWE in pure wrestling. In pure wrestling, they had better wrestlers.
They had Angle and AJ that night that
was
everyone loved.
Yeah, that was the only thing that people liked about
Right.
that. If you really look in retrospect, that was really the only good thing that happened. I mean, when you start off your show with one of the worst cage matches ever, where you can't even get out of it, which is the whole point of the match, and then you actually, and the Homicide falls, and you actually have a camera shot of him falling, and then
the cage.
and the next thing you know, he's outside the cage. Like, wait, what the hell happened? And like, you just really, they screwed themselves, and they had to try to save it with a Jeff Hardy like run-in, which didn't even
I think
work either.
that night, I think they tried doing way too much. They should have kept it simple. That's the main thing. Keep it simple. They didn't need all those run-ins. They could have waited to bring in Ric Flair, waited to bring in Jeff Hardy as the weeks go on to show that Hogan is trying to make changes, trying to bring more viewers. They tried way too hard on that January 4th show. And yes, the Hogan segment was very high rated. I enjoyed that segment, but nothing really came out of it.
What's hilarious about that segment, if you look back now, how the NWO guys came out, the Wolfpack, whatever you want to call them, they came out and said, Hogan said, "We're not doing the same thing we used to do, brother. It's a different time. We
It
can't
was
do that."
97,
And it's the
98
same
night.
thing all
Whether
over
it's
again.
Mick Foley, whether it's Rob Van Dam, now Matt Hardy, they are still continuing their pattern of focusing on whoever guys.
Recycled WWE stars.
Right. Whereas WWE, for the most part in this past year, really hasn't been doing that too much. Now, we're still seeing a lot of the Ortons and Edges and Kanes and Cenas, but they keep harping on the youth movement. And like it or not, they still are introducing a lot of people. Maybe they're not doing it in the greatest way, but Miz is the champion now. That's a big deal. We've seen the rise of Daniel Bryanson and a lot of other people brought in. John Morrison, Sheamus. They're in at least featured spots, if not quite there yet.
Barrett.
Right.
Del
Wade
Rio.
Barrett's another big one.
Jack
So
Swagger was champion. even
right.
though
Well, a
it
lot.
was,
You see, that's another.
They could have did that a lot differently.
Right, and
That
that's what I always criticize this quote youth movement for. They put the belt on Jack Swagger for like a month or two and then take it away immediately. Now Alberto Del Rio's a new one in too, but it seems like all these new guys are like here. we just need to shoot them up to the next level. But do you think this youth movement is succeeding so far? And with the absence of Batista and Michaels and Undertaker, those sort of guys, are we going to see them finally take that spot in the next
I
year?
have to say, to a degree, it's working, but like you said, they're just putting these guys at the top spot, and they're not building them up. Like, one week you see Sheamus,
Champ like that.
yeah, champ, and same thing with Jack Swagger. When before you see guys years and years winning tag titles, Intercontinental titles, building them up. But now it's just too much too soon, and then when the fans don't react when they're champion, then it's like, okay, take
Give
the
up
title
real quick.
off, and that's it.
Well,
Yeah, I
actually,
think they're having a hard time just establishing stars. These guys, they're young, they're talented, and when you say successful, it depends. Are they Rock Austin successful? No. Are they making money off these guys selling merchandise, keeping consistent ratings? Yes. Then in that case, then they are successful with these guys. But very few, actually, I would say none of these guys have that magic, have that spark that's really going to captivate and bring in new audiences. They need to establish these guys, not take the belt off them. I mean, now it's like you're in this ADD wrestling generation where,
That's
people
Russo's
forget-
fault, too.
Yeah, people forget who are the tag champs this year. I mean, I can even tell you the WWE title history from January till December.
Well, actually, what you were saying about how they build stars, I think they built The Miz like that. He was the tag team champion with the Morrison, and then he was the U.S. champion for a long while, and now he's a champion. I feel he was built up correctly, and that's why I was so excited when he got the belt. Like, yes, new blood, and he deserved it. It wasn't like when they got Sheamus and they just threw him up to the top for no reason, and I hate him. But Morrison, they felt, was really built up. They did it right, and when he won a title, it was actually a really good Raw to begin with, and it ended really well. It had everybody talking, had everybody thinking, "Wow, maybe I should check this out next week." So I think youth movement so far. I mean, Wade Barrett's been built up pretty well as well.
It's been good, but these guys need to be in one of those big match fields, like a Rock Hogan, like a Goldberg Hogan, where you really know that the match means something. It's going to go down in history, not be forgotten. That's where they're missing the point. Yes, they might be having good matches on pay-per-view, but who's going to remember a month later when you're already building up to the next pay-per-view? You need that big match feel with these
We
guys.
got to watch WrestleMania then. That's what's going to be. If they really are committed to it, that's what they're going to use.
That's
it
the
as.
test.
That's good. Yes, that's going to be test. That's going to be when are you full of it or are you serious about it? We got to find out.
Speaking of full of it, Linda McMahon did not get elected to the Senate, and that's something we should all remember. But let's move on to Match of the Year. What do you think was Match of the Year, Orlando?
Ring of Honor, that's before the Signer 8, Davey Richards, Tyler Black. If you were on the message boards, that's what everybody was talking about. They had the HD Net interviews going into the match. A big build-up, the crowd was hot.
Well,
Jim
Davey
Cornette
Richards was a huge indie star in
yeah.
2009, and
Yeah.
people felt that was his year, and a lot of people thought he should have won it this year, too, and that was his first time.
Well, Davey Richards was a hot commodity in 2010, wrestling in Japan, wrestling all over the country here for different promotions, and I thought that Davey Richards was going to go into the match and win, which everybody else did. In the beginning of the match, everybody hates Tyler Black. Everybody was giving him crap, but by the end of the match, little by little, they built the crowd up, and it was great.
Me and Kim Kardashian was probably Match of the Year for 2000.
When the hell did that happen?
In LA.
You met her in L.A.?
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you fucking lied. You would have told me immediately.
Yeah, really. That would have been all over the place.
Best match is her ass in my face.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this segment just died. All right. I think in any other year, if Michaels Undertaker hadn't happened, and I love the sequel, let's say, 26 better than the original. I thought the pace matched the feeling a lot more. I liked it a lot better than the first. I know I'm probably in the minority there, but that never stopped me. I think if that had happened any other year, Morrison and Sheamus at TLC had a really awesome ladder match, and that was an incredible display. We all thought, we said on the radio show, would lead to a title match for Miz and Morrison at the Rumble. Guess that didn't happen. But also Kurt Angle, he was like the MVP, and he would probably be my Wrestler of the Year for TNA, because yet again, he gets great matches out of anybody, no matter what shape physically or mentally he might be in, still has incredible matches with everybody. But the match he had with Mr. Anderson at Lockdown, what an incredible match. And I've never been high on Mr. Anderson either.
Say the least.
Right, but he held up his end of the bargain in this match, and that was a great match, probably Match of the Year for TNA. But like I said, Angle might be TNA's Wrestler of the Year. Who do you think was Wrestler of the Year?
The Miz. Again, for being built up for the longest time and finally pull the trigger on him. Looked like they were kind of hesitant on it. They finally pulled the trigger on him, and it worked out. He's done a good job with it as a champion, being a real good heel champion. doing run-ins and hurting people, and you can't touch him or you can't hurt him because he sneaks up on you, you don't sneak up on him. Good stuff. I think they're doing the right thing.
I can't stand The Miz in any way, but he should be champion.
I'm gonna have to go with The Miz also. I mean, if you look at the whole 2010 for The Miz, he went in as United States champion, won the tag titles with Big Show, won Money in the Bank, the WWE title. Like, what more could you ask for? 2010 was The Miz year.
A lot of people forget the U.S. title thing with Bret Hart, too. And
Oh,
I
yeah,
thought that was pretty
yeah.
big, and I see year in review things all the time. No one mentions that. I thought it was important for Miz in building his character to be connected with Bret Hart's history in that sense, but that was forgotten by the writers the next week anyway.
I do like the Miz. Miz had a big year, really coming up the traditional way to being U.S. champion, tag champion. This is a guy who started out basically as running the Diva contest. But I'm going to say Kane, and I called 2010 the 97-98 throwback with Undertaker, Michaels, and the whole January 4th stuff. But Kane, I thought, had a very big year. There's a long time where they really haven't done anything, and it's the first time since 1998 where he's had the world title, and he's had a great run beating Undertaker in 3 straight pay-per-views, and every time you see promos for SmackDown, everything always revolves around Kane, Kane, Kane. This shows that his character is still relevant and can still be hated by fans this day with this generation.
They brought back Paul Bearer and Kane. Yeah, it seemed like it was his thank you for all the years of service and getting a run with the world title that people were wanting. But Kevin Steen had an incredible 2010. Going from, first of all, he's disgusting enough as it is, but turning that into his heel character and just being revolting in every way, it really helped his psycho character get over to the point where he almost didn't even need Steve Corino at some point.
Yeah.
He was just so over the top with that. And not only that, he was keeping up his wrestling too. It wasn't just all character driven. His wrestling was really good. People loved that Generico blow off at Final Battle. But even in a small match in Toronto or wherever against Player Uno or Dos, whatever their stupid names are, I forget what, but that was an incredible match. And it reminded me of the old days of Ring of Honor when it was all action up and down the card and everyone tried hard no matter what to have the match of the night. It was a good throwback, and Kevin Steen, even if it was a little match in Dayton in a tag match, it was him and Carino against Cole and O'Reilly, and he broke out this marrow salt essentially from the middle rope to the top rope, and he looks like he's 9 months pregnant due any day.
Wow.
So it was really incredible. So Kevin Steen, I think, was definitely Wrestler of the Year for Ring of Honor. But let's see what you think. Post underneath the video, post on the message board. We are going to move on to the 5th anniversary of Eddie Guerrero's death when we come back.